Did you know that as humans, we have this innate ability to be able to use media to understand and contextualize the world that we live in? But LLMs don't have that same skill, which is really kind of fascinating when you use an LLM for a research piece on the media, which is what I've done this week. So that's what we're going to be covering in this week's Data Radio Show. Hello there. In this week's Data Radio Show, I'm going to be sitting down and having a chat to James Hartwright from Pragmaticians around media and LLMs. It's not necessarily around data architecture like you'd normally find on the show, but it is a really fascinating way to look into what makes us human and how we interact with something like media, which is a really human way of communicating. Media gives us tools and context that we can use to understand the world around us, but we use that understanding to program LLMs. So how much can they understand? So it's a bit of a broad topic, but it's a really fascinating conversation, especially if you're kind of curious into what the future of media is going to look like in a world where LLMs and AI models out there are doing a lot more work for people in terms of inspiring us or educating us or informing us. But before we get into that interview, make sure that you hit that like button, share, subscribe, tell everybody about this episode. Until then, let's jump over, catch up with James. Hello there, welcome to another episode of the Data Radio Show. This one is a little bit different. We're not going to be focusing on things like data architecture, but we are going to be looking into AI on a really specific topic, looking around media analysis. Joining me this week, I've got James Hartwright from Pragmaticians. How are you going, James?
Good, thank you.
Fantastic. I'm really excited that you get a chance to join me for this one because this is a topic near and dear to my heart. A bit of context for the viewers out there. When I'm not doing this, I create content around media analysis and what's going on, particularly in the media in this country with our politicians. I've got a following of, last time I checked, it was about 30,000 people. So this might be a big crossover episode with them. But I did a bit of a research project a few weeks ago around how much our politicians end up in the media and whether or not it's a bit of a bias happening there, or whether or not we're seeing some politicians get more media mention than maybe they should based on the representative layout of our parliament. It was really fascinating because I used AI to help me build that analysis framework, and it came back really accurate. Like, I was surprised at just how accurate AI got the quantitative stuff, or the qualitative stuff, sorry, the numbers, no, that is quantitative. Yeah. One of those days.
Yep.
And I'm kind of curious, James. Yeah, quantity is numbers. Quality is qualitative. It's been a while since I got my degree. I'm kind of curious, James, from your perspective, how do you see AI helping with becoming this kind of tool to help people with analysis, with understanding things a bit better, with interpreting the world around them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, look, the often quoted piece of 90% of content generated today is unstructured. I would go it's semi-structured in that it's come from somewhere. It's probably on a topic. But yeah, basically there's lots of stuff out there that isn't straight away stats or metrics related, that those things that you said in terms of go off and query and look at volumes, that's actually you asking a question, applying some criteria to probably textual data and then returning it. So yeah, that ability for natural language queries to be able to run against broad blocks of data, way more powerful for a simple user rather than the data scientist to go and pull that data out and build a contextual framework around it. Much higher and easier than today than in a couple of 3 years ago.
Now, I'm not young anymore. It was 20 odd years that I did my studying ago. I'm kind of curious whether or not you're seeing young people come through these days who are much more, as digital natives, much more able to use these to better prompt engineer, to create better tools for them in that field.
They've definitely got the capability to use the tools. My niece has just started a postgrad course in PR and media, so I'm hot on the topic at the moment. Where digital natives, she's 24, 25, so where a true digital native is coming through, and is trying to apply that piece in how media is broadcast and how she can utilize that media channel to get her PR stuff over. So I definitely agree that the tools and the capability that they are able to use has progressed, and their thought process is in naturally going and looking out in those areas to pull through. So I think thumbs up in terms of capability, but the piece absolutely that only us grey-haired people seem to be able to properly apply is, hey, is the gut feel there? Does it, putting that critical thinking, putting the statistical analysis over the top of the results you get back and applying that. And especially with some of the pieces that have been built that have an inherent bias in them.
Yeah. Now, I know I have a bias in my content because I'm terribly self-aware, and it's a horrible, horrible thing to have to live with sometimes. One of the things I was very specific to do with my piece, though, was an actual old-fashioned analysis, just to make sure that it matched. That's how I know that it was actually relatively accurate. In terms of what we see with media bias and the way that media works around the world, is that something that kind of research that goes into what people are doing, how content is presented, stuff like that? Do you think that's something that large language models are going to be able to refine better in the future, taking what people are watching, taking that information and helping us produce better content?
I think there's definitely an initial piece where it can. There's a level of its ability to reach into the data. So one of the things I said to my niece was, you already have an account, you already have an Twitter account, and that gives you accessibility to draw data down. But that will already be driven by what X wants and thinks you like watching, reading, engaging with. So I said, set up 2 accounts and do one that is so fairly left-leaning. She is, and go in and use that as your normal account. Set up a completely opposite account and go and read the things. Go and look at the things that you have an averseness to that you wouldn't go and normally read, and utilize both of those because there is a truth. You can go and try and hook into the fire hose of X, but you'll have to pay for it, blah, blah, blah. So there are limitations on your ability to do that. But yeah, go and draw through from as many different sources as you can. There's the thing around LLMs as they're constructed at the moment. So we know there's an inherent bias in the LLMs. They've been trained on the data that's been put out there in the last 10 years. They're going to be increasingly biased because there's more being generated. There's AI stuff being generated. But on the converse, there are LLMs being built that are going, there's a curated set of content that they go in. So it's not going to go off and look at Reddit, even though that might be really interesting. It's not going to go and look off at X. It's going to say, I'm going to take literature, Wikipedia that's generally curated, and any sort of encyclopedic stuff that I hesitate to say it, but more towards truth, ratification of content, and LLMs being built around there. So if we utilize those to go off and pull, there's an increased likelihood that there's an accuracy, an increased level of truth in there. But then you've got the other side, which is LLMs quite naturally are going to be created for commercial purposes via media organizations who have an alternate leaning, an alternate product view. They want to sell product. They want to get you interacting with it more. So they will start creating LLMs that have an inherent bias in them, and they will feed it with things that reinforce the bias because they know that they can get more advertising money. They know they get more subscribers out of the back of it. So we're going to continue with this lots of competing pieces, and therefore increased still a level of that critical thinking that the humans need to apply when they're drawing that data out.
Do humans have the ability to keep up with the critical thinking skills they need to work in a field where you've got these okay.
Yeah, I think, look, similarly to you, is I always go in and look at something. I'm very analytical, look at something and go, does that actually meet? But I have an inherent bias of 50 years of how I've been brought up and where I am in my life and financially that will obviously skew my. So I don't think it's possible. But I think, as you said, just taking it in, looking at it, considering, trying to match it back to something else, asking another LLM whether the things that you've got in that LLM seem accurate or not. All those sorts of things you can apply to sort of get something where you feel comfortable with it, that if you're putting it together as a non-partisan item, that it is as much as you can. Yeah.
In terms of LLMs, as I mentioned before, not great with the quality side of things, with being able to identify bias. Is that something that audiences are aware of, or that program designers are aware of?
But let me do an example. I still scroll through Facebook in front of the telly, like dual device. And increasingly I'm getting popped up amazing houses, and it's an image of a beautiful kitchen or a cabin somewhere, and I'm just going immediately 7 legs on that chair, 3 legs on that chair. It's AI generated, and there'll be about a 1% of comments that go, guys, this is AI generated. I know it looks beautiful, but it's not real. And I think we just have to be continually vigilant in that level of truth and that level of understanding. And the more we feed AI with the more information, the cleverer it's going to get, and the more we're going to have to be just vigilant in what we take from it.
For a platform then like Meta, with Facebook, Instagram, which is not particularly fact-based, it's driven by emotion and interactions with people and stuff like that, and it's been recognized as a place for disinformation and creating bubbles that people work within. Does that make their Meta AI something to be more concerned about if you're using it as a resource?
There's a level of regulation that is starting to come in that I've seen to a greater or lesser extent, which is still that the human piece. So that piece where somebody's gone in and said, "Hey guys, it's AI generated." If Meta, in its summarization of all of the comments that it's starting to pop up, can go, at least one person has said this is AI generated. That's a positive. And the other piece is in somebody's posted something, and then somebody else has posted, actually, here is a link to what's really going on. That's a step in the positive direction from my perspective. But I think we've got to get those media publishers in line to go, well, if you've got AIs generating this, or you've got groups generating it, something that in the moderation part that is actually going, I'm sorry, this, the Snopes bit, I'm sorry, this has been completely, this is completely untruthful, blah, blah, blah. And that we're in the speed of AI. So it's not, it gets generated and then 12 hours, 24 hours less, somebody puts in actually, this isn't true. It's got to be, before a post gets released, it has an immediate check. And then within the next 5 minutes, it has a more detailed check to basically get to stop the misinformation getting out or slow it down.
Can AI work that fast?
Oh, totally.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. Look, it's going to be, as with all things, there is going to be an inherent cost to it. But I think, something will go in, and it will probably be government led. And there's greater or lesser extents to which we'd like government to go and interfere. But I think something that says they must, and having that set up is just starts to become, as more misinformation gets out and more people understand that an echo chamber isn't an amazing thing, that it will just naturally, all the humans, the populace, will go, this needs to be in place. The government will go, yes, we absolutely agree, and then there will be a level of enforcement into media that will occur. Good law comes from the populace agreeing. Yeah, and I think we're getting there.
The EU AI Act, I think, covers that a little bit. I can't say I've done a huge amount of digging into that yet. That's my project for later in the week.
Okay, yeah.
And I understand Australia's just put in its guidelines as opposed to
some guidelines together. Yeah.
Do you feel they're going in the right direction?
Definitely, in terms of what the acts are doing. The first piece that they're doing, though, again, quite rightly, it's things like financial decisions. So you've given me all of this information, and if I've used bias, gender bias, racial bias, religious bias, anything in there to make this decision, we should all agree that's a bad thing. And so those AI policies are in there to go make sure that there's no bias in there by publicizing the attributes that are used in this model. And then the secondary part of that is that if you disagree with the outcome of that, you can have a human come in and review that data and make a human-based decision, which will hopefully come out with something better from your experience perspective. So yes, it's in that financial orientation. It hasn't hit misinformation, disinformation in media or anywhere else. It's the high impact, high negative bias parts that the AI policies are hitting today.
Around the world as well, we have a whole bunch of public broadcasters. We've got a couple here. There's the BBC. Is the ABC in Australia a public broadcaster?
In Australia, yeah.
PBS in the United States. They're funded by government. The rules are different for each of them in the locations that they're in around how funding works, where they can take information from and stuff like that. Does that kind of challenge that they face as public broadcasters trying to do something for the public good create any kind of issues for a large language model that might not be able to identify a media bias or influence from a politician or other kind of outside influence?
Yeah, look, so in most countries, the publicly funded, government funded, or it's always suggested there's a left-leaning bias.
Yeah, which is really strange because I know with ours, and I can't say anything for the others, but I know with for New Zealand's one, our media has a right-leaning bias. It's not usually a huge right-lean. It's not Fox News, but they tend to have more of a focus on the individual over the collective, and they tend to focus more on economic outcomes than they do over societal outcomes. Okay. So that gives you that right-leaning bias. But humans can't recognize that. No. And if humans can't recognize it, I wonder if LLMs can.
So the level of part of it's going to be down to the level of underlying initial set of information that LLM is fed. So think of a young child. So in that first 3 to 5 years, what the information you're feeding that child will in a lot of ways build its inherent personality. So if you feed the new LLM with stuff that is across Reddit and X and maybe right-leaning stuff, that's its base personality. If you then add public broadcasting in on top of that, it will skew it a little, but it's not an inherent personality. So the big piece there is there a way in which the data that I'm putting in, the sources that I'm using, I can try and keep that equivalence, try and get it as centric as possible. So if you only trained it on Fox News, if you only trained it on ABC or BBC, you'll probably find alternate leanings. So yeah, building the LLM with an acknowledgement for what it is that you're putting in, and then testing it for bias. Testing as a human, if I go and ask it a question and I feel that it's moving one way or the other, to actually start looking and seeing where that information came from and retuning.
As humans, we don't pick up bias particularly well if it's something that we agree with, particularly if it's something that we agree with. Our confirmation bias kicks in really fast there. do you think there'll be a problem there in the future with humans going, well, this has been trained on PBS and my bias is much more right-leaning than this, so it's wrong, so I don't trust what it has to say?
Yeah, definitely. There could be, but I think that will be so. There will be LLMs that are trying to be trained up on all of these sources, and I'm increasingly going, "Hey LLM, tell me the source you use for that piece of information. You provide it back to me." And in most cases, it does give me a URL. In some cases, it goes, "Oh yeah, sorry, that's not real anymore." So continually testing it, poking at it. But as I said earlier, I also think that LLMs will be being created that will naturally have a bias. Whether that AI policy then starts to go, hey, you're coming in and you're using an LLM that is inherently biased, you will make that product choice. You will make that choice to pick and use that. And it's you. So. I did work for News Corp for 3 years, and so I knew there was an inherent bias in the product. And the best way I could equate it in terms of the people that came in and read and consumed was it's like Apple and Android. So I'm an iPhone user. I will only ever use iPhones. Androids, I just can't see myself getting to hold with it. That's the product I picked, and I'm going to stay there until something drastically changes. And I know there's many Android people out there that will do the same. So there will be people that like, enjoy, consume, pay for that product that is News Corp or Fox News or etc. And there will be other people who will go, I'm never going to touch a Murdoch publication, and I'm going to go over and use these PBSs or others that I'm feeling are Guardian, left-centric. So I also think that, those are going to be built up and they're going to be used. And as humans, you are just going to go and start using them. The echo chamber gets greater, etc., etc. But that is your choice. You have gone off to this publication because you know what it is. You've gone off to use this product because you know how it's been constructed, and it reinforces your choice part. Lifting that up higher in terms of whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, we as humans, again, just have to make our own decisions on what we do there.
Is there a cultural element in there as well about how we as humans understand information that would be put out by an LLM that's fed up on this media? Like, we don't have Murdoch media here in this country. So, and I don't think we've got anything quite so prolific as Fox News or anything like that in terms of its bias. But you'll often see comments online or feedback from stuff that's coming from overseas from a New Zealand perspective where it feels far more extreme than maybe somebody who's living within that environment. So I'm kind of curious whether or not a cultural understanding of different media landscapes and the way that an LLM would interact with that or interpret it would have an impact ultimately in how a place like us understands news that's coming out of Australia.
Yeah. Look, 100%. That even today, what have most of the LLMs been trained on? It's stuff that's out there on the internet. So, so you look at New Zealand, the population of New Zealand against the population of Australia and what they generate, against the population of the US and what they generate. Yeah, and you'll have a definitive cultural skew towards the country that has been generating the most. There's been starters in taking non-English, structuring that, translating it, we're using another LLM, and then feeding that to try and get a more global perspective. But there's still going to be cultural bias, cultural skew in any of those. There has to be, because of the volume of data. You can't go, let's make every country down to the 4 to 5 million of New Zealand, and that's all we're going to allow in. So there will always be a cultural bias. But we see that in what we consume anyway. The TV programs you watch aren't 100% New Zealand generated. There'll be heavy US and a partial UK, but and Australia. But it's not actually that far away from what we're getting bombarded with, presented with anyway.
Okay. If we have LLMs out there that are being trained on media, trained on all that information out there, is there a future for organizations like public broadcasters?
Ooh, there's a whole other scenario piece there. So at the moment, the vast majority of us will go off and go to Google, and we will go and do our Google searches. We've been trained, and articles, whatever, etc., will pop up, and I will go and click on them, and then follow my train of thought. In the very near future, that is all going to be LLM based. I'm going to ask the LLM, hey, I'm interested in this. Could you tell me something about that based on recent articles that have been published? So the publishers, those who are already out there in public broadcast, will release their information because they're paid for by the government. That will be easily accessible to the LLM. Whereas the paid publishers are going to be constrained because the LLM's sucking out whatever they've gone. The secondary part, though, is where do they get their advertising money from if the LLM's doing all the work and all the interaction? You might eventually get to a page, but secondary piece is just ask the LLM to summarize the article. Don't show me any adverts. So I think there's a big shift coming in how the traditional modern media of here is a page, here are adverts up and down around, and this is how you engage, to those LLMs that are going to be basically pushing all of those pieces away. And as big a change as we had when we started using Google, that it's going to spin the other way. I've started thinking about what might happen in those. I suspect what is going to happen is that the LLMs are going to start being crowded with adverts, but it's going to be aligned with the publisher that they provided the information to. So there's going to be an appropriate level of sharing. Hey, by me drawing in that article and summarizing it, I'm still going to pay you a small amount, or I'll pay you a portion of the advertising that I get back off it. But it's who knows? Who knows what's going to happen in the next couple of years on that basis?
If I remember correctly, Australia has a rule in place around Google paying for news media.
Yes.
We're having that conversation here. Does that impact... First of all, does that actually impact what people see? Has that had an impact on how people interact with the media?
I must admit I haven't looked. I think it was the right way. That piece in terms of that Google was taking an increasing amount of ad revenue from the publishers. You can take the separate thing of publishers bringing the quality down, paying for, hey, it's clickbait, it gets me the money. But yeah, if journalists are getting paid less and less for creating content, and the search engines of the world are also not paying for that content, we've got a good race to the bottom there. Yeah. I can only generate it via AI. Rather than some good independent journalism, it is totally a race to the bottom. So I think, something will change. So that bit in the publishers recognizing, acknowledging that content was going away and advertising dollars were going away, put the LLM search on top of that, and it's not going to be Google that are going to be saying, it'll be OpenAI's and Claude. They're going to be going, hey, you've been taking my data. We need some level of sharing. We need some level of appropriate revenue sharing off the back of that.
Is there going to be a point where an LLM can say, look, this is the best model that we should be using for media because this way we all get paid, and you're not human, so you could never come up with it yourself?
Yeah, why not? Yeah, totally. And you and I as an individual to go and say to the LLM, I want both sides of the picture, please. I don't want you to follow my echo chamber, my bias. I want you to throw in articles that are really anti my my sense of what the world is like. That would be an amazing thing. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I think it's a really important thing.
Yeah. But yes, still, there's got to be, somebody's got to pay for the building of that. Somebody's got to pay for the running of that. The cost for running LLMs is, I think, against Google, it's between 20 and 200 times more expensive to run an LLM query than it is to run a Google query. So something's got to come up that's going to pay for that.
Yeah. That's actually really kind of scary. Thinking about it, I didn't realize it was that much of a disparity in the amounts. And I know the power draw, like the energy draw, is also kind of
correlated.
monitored.
And that's a big part of it. That you're going to use computing power, so you've got to have the computers, you've got to have the electricity to power those computers.
Yeah, because was it OpenAI that's just bought a couple of nuclear power plants?
Yep, trying to help them grow with something that is slightly better than running coal, depending on who you ask.
Well, we're very anti-nuclear in this country, so I probably shouldn't comment on whether or not we'll never have a nuclear power plant here.
That's another discussion.
That's one that this country will die on a hill over. I think it's very, very contentious. In terms of entertainment media, do you think what do you think the future of LLMs are there? Because there was the writers and actors strike that we saw last year, and one of the most contentious issues that was cropping up there was artificial intelligence writing and AI characters being brought in, or AI likenesses of dead actors. Do you think it will have much of an impact going forward, or do you think it's deliberately being held down at the moment by the people who will be impacted by it?
I think deliberately and appropriately. The use of somebody's voice that with 15 seconds of voice recording, we can now emulate somebody's voice, and you can have somebody generally talking in the style or just throwing it through, and that's just going to get better and better. And the deep fake images and the creation of content through AI is just going to get better and better and better. There's some part of that of creating it that just will come. This has to be 100% human. Well, CGI broke that 20 years ago. We got CGI figures that are doing part of it. But I think possibly the backlash is going to come in at some point I do want unique content. I don't want the 877th movie in the MCU to come out, and because it's been factored in of, this number of people will watch it and enjoy it, and and we're going to leave them hanging and make sure that we have the little excerpt at the end of the credits. Something will change in that the sameness will actually start impacting people that will watch it. But another interesting area. But I totally agree with, if there is an artist there, not just in media, but hey, my unique piece of art back there, which was drawn by a cartoonist using my face, I could probably go in and ask LLM to do that again now, but it's not authentic. It doesn't feel authentic when it's taking away from people who are embedded in the art and just the beauty of uniqueness of creating something from the James image was just such a positive. It was a gift of my leaving present, and it was just such a great thing. And if it had been done via an LLM, I don't think it would have had the same impact on me. And I think we can apply that to movies, to any art, to TV series, etc., that we've got to keep the human part of that in there.
How much of a risk is there of politicians coming under sort of AI recreations causing trouble? We actually had a news story hit the news, I think it was yesterday. 74-year-old pensioner scammed out of her life savings because she saw an AI ad with our Prime Minister saying you should invest it all in crypto. Something that people should, it's obviously happened.
It's obviously happened, and it will continue to happen. It will get better and better. That thing on the voice recording, it was off a 60 Minutes piece where the security person, the white hat hacker, had gone in and called the assistant of the presenter on 60 Minutes and got the assistant to hand over her passport number because she'd managed to emulate the voice within 5 minutes. So that and the deep fakes and the images, again, there's a level that we can do this in terms of that. If it's been posted on or in around Meta, we can do some things of no, this needs to be reinforced that it did actually happen. And our intelligence to be able to look at that, understand it, look at the words and go, does this actually feel right? Even to the AI, does it feel right to basically put a hold on it until somebody can have a look? But yeah, I think some of that will come through. But the nefarious side, the foreign state bad actors, they're not going to be under those constraints. They are going to try and they're going to naturally, from being bad actors, they're going to try and do that. So the genie is out of the bottle. It is going to happen. And it's going to get better and better. And yeah, we are going to be in the place where what you said, I need to see it with my own two eyes. Well, I'm sorry. Unless you're physically there, we're going to be in a position where that's just, you will not be able to trust what you see. There are levels of things that we can do, but it's going to be a gamification. Hey, we put in a little DRM digital thing in to go, this was really true. And then somebody's going to be able to emulate the DRM. And then we're going to have to think of something else and then do something else. And it will be a continual game, not a great game, but a continual game to keep ahead of those things.
Last question for you. How can we use a tool like an LLM to help educate people to be more aware of what's happening in their media sphere, to identify bias or to recognize an artificial image, things like that?
Yeah, and we can definitely go in and ask it, and some of those things, back to the AI policy, some of those pieces are that are being deployed are, hey, here is the LLM or predictive AI that's done this decision, and what we'll have is another parallel AI that's running that's going, please check this for any level of bias. And so LLMs running sort of as the left and right shoulder, angel and devil part is going to increase, I believe. So that's going to double the amount of energy that we're going to use. Mm-hmm. But I think this thing of having one LLM that does a thing and then have another LLM to go, do you feel that based on what you see that there's any bias in that response, is going to be a thing. And it will probably be packaged as a single, here is an LLM that does that. But yeah, that's on the basis of you coming in and going, this is what I want to do. I want something that is that I want the truth, rather than I want the product. And I think there's only a certain percentage of the population that will want to pay the additional for what is as close to the truth without the bias that's out there.
Fantastic. I think that's all my questions. And this has been really educational. So thank you very much, James. It's very much appreciated. People can hunt you down online at LinkedIn.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Brilliant.
Pragmaticians. Yep.
Excellent. I'll make sure that there's a link for that in the description. All right. Have a fantastic day.
Thank you. See you again.
Hey, thanks for checking out this week's episode of the Data Radio Show. I want to thank James again for joining me. I always enjoy sitting down and having a bit of a chat with him. And if you want to find that research piece, I'll make sure there's a link to it in the description below. Again, don't forget, if you haven't already, to hit that like button or share the video or podcast, depending on where it is that you're getting the content from. Until next time, make sure you live long and prosper. May the force be with you.